What would happen if you changed your relationship with digital media? I'm not talking about just scaling back or doing a digital detox for a weekend. What if you made major changes to how you interact with the virtual world? And what if those changes led to a version of you that feels more free, more happy, more empowered, and more in control? Over the past several years, I've experimented with stepping away from social media and drastically reducing my exposure to digital content. And every time I do, I notice the same thing. I feel more happy, more free, more empowered, and more in control of my time, and essentially more in control of my life. So, in this episode, I want to share 3 mental health insights that I've experienced after deleting social media and reframing my relationship with digital content. I'm not sharing this as a blanket prescription for everyone, but I'm inviting you to think about your current relationship with the digital world and whether or not it's moving you closer or further away from the person you want to be. Welcome to Wellness for High Performers, where ambitious people discover the path to sustainable wellness that actually feels good so they can build the dream without burning out. I'm your host, Erica Jones. I'm a wellness strategist and entrepreneur, and I help high performers create massive momentum by weaving wellness into their daily life. Hey there, I'm Erica Jones, and I want to talk about social media today because our world is growing more and more digitally dependent. And there's a small but growing group of people who are intentionally pushing back against that narrative. Even as giant tech companies are insistent that AI will change the world for the better, there are many people questioning those claims. And some of our skepticism is a direct response to how digital dependence has affected our lives, our attention spans, our children, and our way of relating to other people. And I think this skepticism is not only healthy, but absolutely necessary. And the stats prove it because US adults are spending more than 7 hours a day on screens. And this is excluding screen time associated with work by some reports. The average person checks their phone nearly 100 times per day. That's about once every 10 minutes. A 2022 study found that nearly half of all smartphone use is out of habit and not intentional. Teenagers are now spending 8 to 9 hours a day entertaining themselves with screens. And a researcher I follow recently wrote an article about how film students can no longer watch film without digital distraction. We're all being impacted whether we know it or not. So, what has happened to humanity when we mindlessly reach for our phones and begin swiping without fully realizing what we're doing? How is it that when confronted with even the slightest amount of downtime, like standing in a line or waiting for a date to come back to the table after using the restroom, so many of us pick up our phones to fill the space of 5 minutes? Why is it that young people cannot make conversation or even eye contact for that matter? And how many times have we watched an hour or more evaporate because we're scrolling, checking email for the 10th time in an hour, or Googling that burning question that led us down a rabbit hole of wasted time? These are questions I've been asking myself because even as a person who's very conscientious of digital use, I too have experienced all of the above. And it's not because I'm lacking in willpower, and I doubt that you're lacking in willpower either. It's because these devices are expertly designed to make us all addicted and dependent on them. And without intentionally changing the direction, that's what we will create and experience. It's kind of like someone who makes no effort to invest in their health. They will, without a doubt, be subjected to the default settings for Western culture as they age. And that includes one or more chronic illnesses like heart disease, diabetes, rapid cognitive decline, and cancer. We're now at a time in our culture where the digital world has become so integrated into our daily lives that we will by default be slaves to technology unless we take control and make the technology slaves to our will and our desires. So, in this podcast episode, I want to share a few things that I've discovered in my own journey of walking this road and the benefits and insights I've gleaned and what I'm still figuring out, in the hope that it encourages and inspires you to rethink your relationship with technology or reaffirm the boundaries that you've already set in place. I will use terms like social media and digital dependence frequently, and sometimes interchangeably. I think of digital dependence as exactly as it sounds. It's our tendency to rely heavily on devices and technology by way of repeated daily use. And much of what I share about social media can also be said about digital dependence. You can be digitally dependent without ever using social media. You can incessantly browse the internet. You can check your email or scroll news sites. My goal in clarifying the meanings of these terms is so that when I use the term social media, no one feels like they're off the hook because they don't have an Instagram account. I also want to make it clear that I'm not against digital technology. I use digital tech on a regular basis and I intend to continue. I'm simply posing questions and offering some insights that I've gleaned over the years because I believe that this is an essential conversation for wellness. So, with that, let's dive into insight number one, which is this: we don't have to be on social media. This is contrary to what we've been told. But for me, this one was easy enough to accept personally because FOMO, or fear of missing out, isn't a big driver for me. But this was tough for me to accept from a business perspective. About 7 to 8 years ago, I was like a lot of business owners rushing to grow on platforms like Instagram. And this included endless hours of filming, editing, and posting reels, as well as responding to comments. And you know what? I absolutely hated it. At the time, I had a small team and they insisted that I post on Instagram stories regularly to document quote unquote behind the scenes moments of my daily life. Now, as a private person, this for me felt like some kind of visual spectatorship that I was not keen to participate in. And that's probably why I was never super successful on those platforms. I wasn't willing to dance to the beat of the algorithm. So when I shut my business down in 2023, I felt the biggest relief to never have to post to Instagram again. And this had been a years long buildup of tension that felt like a massive energy misalignment. I was pouring a ton of effort into a platform that was draining me, not just in the effort to put together the content. I was honestly so sick of dancing and pointing in the air. Anyone that's ever created Instagram Reels knows exactly what I'm talking about. But also, the amount of time that I spent distracted by the platform was also a huge drain. When I really needed to be working on my business, I was instead responding to comments, checking how many people liked a recent post, reviewing the stats from the previous month. The return was not worth it. It wasn't worth the energy, and it also wasn't worth it for my business. Most of my business was not coming from social media, but I continued posting for the longest time because I was told that's what I should do. So I will reiterate again, we don't have to be on social media. I would ask you, if you are on social media platforms, what is the real ROI of your presence there, whether it's for personal or business use? And if it disappeared tomorrow, what would actually change for you? Is it really adding value to your life? And if so, can you quantify it? In what way is it adding value? And then after you look at that, are there better ways to get the same value for less time and effort? These are questions that I would be asking to help reframe the relationship with social media if you're someone who feels that your relationship with this piece of technology can improve. And I think most people would align with that statement. The second insight that I learned or gleaned over the years, have gleaned and I'm still working out, is that our leisure time is likely suffering because of social media and digital dependence. Everyone knows that social media and digital dependence can destroy your productivity. We're very much accustomed to that idea. But many of us don't realize how our digital use is affecting our perception of leisure time and how we use the leisure time we have. So, most people view their time through a lens of scarcity. They never seem to have enough. How many times have you heard someone say, I'm too busy to do XYZ? How many times have you said this to yourself? I know I've said it so many times, especially to justify bypassing something that may be of high value or high priority. This is especially true of high performers who are often overcommitted and running on empty. But the reality is, the average American spends 2 to 2.5 hours a day on social media alone. That's 15 to 17 hours a week. That's literally a part time job. And this adds up to over a month per year on social media. Digital dependence exacerbates time scarcity because our dependence on technology makes it easy for us to consume it in small, distracted nuggets. And remember, like I said just a few minutes ago, this does not just apply to social media. It applies to people who are maybe addicted to or frequently peruse news sites and they waste a lot of time there, or they waste a lot of time on Reddit or browsing the internet for different things. So a lot of us lose that time through these small, distracted nuggets. We'll spend 5 minutes here, 15 minutes there, not realizing that the total time spent adds up to hours throughout the day. This reinforces the idea that we don't have enough time, but it's not because that idea is true. It's because the time is mindlessly slipping away through pings and clicks involving our devices. This is a dangerous place to be because, one, not only does the time fly when we're engaged in these platforms, I'm sure you've experienced where you're on your device and you don't realize, oh my gosh, 30 minutes just went by. We've all done that before. That's a problem. But the other reason why this is so dangerous is because typically when we are on these devices, this is a low value, low priority use of our time. It's not typically something that we're getting a high ROI on. It's just kind of time that's slipping endlessly into the ether. And so the result is that our valuable time and energy is slipping through our hands without us even realizing it because we're giving it up through these small, distracted nuggets all throughout the day. And this may be most evident in the way that people spend their downtime or their leisure time. There was a time when people actually had hobbies. Remember those? The activities that one would invest their leisure time in for the simple sake of pleasure, things like cooking or baking, gardening, riding a bike, going for a hike, playing an instrument, or doing a jigsaw puzzle, writing. These are some of my favorites. There was a time when people would really go to their hobbies and invest their energy there. But these days, the art of quality leisure time has been lost. Most of the time, we're more content to just sit on the couch, scroll through our phones, or binge a few episodes on Netflix. When I cut back on my digital dependence and started making more time for high value, high priority things, I started realizing how much free time I actually do have. And I do not say that lightly because I'm busy. I'm homeschooling 4 children. I'm building and running businesses with my husband and running our household. There's never a moment that I don't have something to do. But even with all of that, I realized that there's room for me to create more time and space for what I love and for what I value. And when I started creating more boundaries with my phone, especially, I instantly freed up more time. So I'm asking you, what could you create if you reclaimed just 1 hour per day? What hobbies have you abandoned that you once truly loved? When was the last time you were bored? There's a case being made by scientists and researchers that boredom is good for our brains. I tell my kids this regularly. When's the last time you were bored? If someone audited your leisure time, would it reflect what you say you value? So that's insight number two. It's all about how we're spending our leisure time and the fact that digital dependence can actually reduce the quality of leisure time that we have. Number three is a bit of a mouthful, but I'm going to leave it as I've written it. And it's that digital dependence begets digital dependence, and digital freedom begets digital freedom. So, what I've experienced is that the more entrenched I become in the digital world, the more I crave it. Investing my time in the world of algorithms and fast paced content trains my brain to desire more and more of that type of content. It's a hijacking of my attention span, making it more difficult to focus. And this is a huge liability for me because I like to think through ideas, I like to write, I like to explore creatively. Now, conversely, the more I exercise my autonomy over technology, the more freedom I feel and the more I want to wield that control over it versus allowing it to control me. Now, it turns out that there's science behind this idea, and it involves the concept of neuroplasticity. Neuroplasticity is the brain's incredible ability to adapt to our environment and experience of life by forming new neural connections and altering existing ones. So, what that means is that the more we ingrain certain habits, the more the brain adapts to expect those habits. So the brain orients itself to what we repeatedly feed it. If we feed it speed and novelty through rapid content consumption, much what you would like to find on social media like TikTok or Instagram, then that's what the brain will come to expect and crave. But if we feed it slower, more controlled, and intentional content that requires a deeper level of focus and attention, then that's what the brain will crave. It all comes down to a personal decision and intention. So I'll ask you, what kind of brain are you training yourself to have? Does your attention span feel strong or does it feel fragmented? Are your daily digital habits leading you into the person you want to become? And what is the opportunity cost of your current digital habits? What are you not doing that you would be doing if you weren't involved with your devices at the level that you are? So, hopefully, these questions lead to good insights. And I don't think my goal in asking these questions is to come to a conclusion that everybody needs to jump off of their devices, get rid of all of your social media. For me, that's worked well. But at least asking the question of how am I using these devices and at least creating more intention around how the devices are being used, I think is really important and beneficial, not just for how our brains are developing and how we're using our time, but it's also really impactful for our mental health as well. So the goal is to identify how we can be more intentional with our use of these technologies. And that really brings me to where I am now. Over the years, as I've mentioned, I've experimented with digital detoxes because I've noticed that without intentional intervention, I have a tendency to rely far too much on technology. And most of my digital sabbaticals have been aligned to spiritual fasts with the goal of connecting deeply with God. And that connection is best facilitated when I'm not inundated with streams of digital content. So anytime I've chosen to go on a digital detox, I've always walked away feeling more clear, more mentally free, more calm, more at rest, even more energized. These grounded feelings are easier for me to access in the absence of constant digital stimulation. I have been reading more than I ever have been. I've learned to play an instrument. I've been investing in hobbies that really light me up, but don't involve technology. I learned to bake sourdough bread a couple of years ago. I love to invest my creative mind into cooking and coming up with new things in the kitchen. So, all of these things are fueled by a passion to one, invest my time into things and people and hobbies that I really value, but also as a way to fill my time with life giving activities that don't rely on technology. So I was confronted with the idea of eliminating social media entirely when I read Cal Newport's book, Deep Work. I highly recommend it. And especially for those who earn their living by way of specialized knowledge, this is a great book for you. One of the suggestions in the book was to get rid of social media. I did not read it for that purpose. I mostly read it to find ways to create more space for deeper work in my life. But this was one of the suggestions in the book. So I read this book towards the end of 2025. And so I decided to take him up on his suggestion for a period of time. I was going to go 30 days into 2026 with a social media free existence, if you will. So I deleted platforms like X and Instagram from my phone. I scaled back greatly on my consumption of YouTube content. And here we are in March as of the time of this recording, and I haven't missed these platforms at all. So once I finished Deep Work, I was so inspired by that book. I moved on to Cal's next book called Digital Minimalism. I don't know if it's the next book in the sequence of how he wrote, but it was the next book for me. So I'm still in the middle of that book. And this one is a little bit different in that it challenges the reader to go on a 30-day digital detox. This book is all about rethinking our relationship with technology. So, this 30-day digital detox that he mentions in digital minimalism, it's not a detox where you take a break and then reintroduce the same platforms and technologies. I've done that many times. And I do find it helpful and useful because it acts as a reset, but this book is deeper than that. This book is really a total overhaul or rethinking of how you interact with the digital world as a whole. So it's not just limited to your phone, it's not limited to anything. It's how do you use your Apple TV? Do you use an iPad? How do you use that? If you have a laptop, how do you use that? The goal is to help you to develop a philosophy, a technology philosophy and specific plan for how and when you'll engage in technology in an effort to use tech as a tool versus you being the tool that's being used by tech. So the ideas in this book are a lot more tedious to work through. They require things like listing all of the optional technology that you use in a day and getting rid of anything that's optional for a minimum of 30 days. And so, optional technologies would be those that you can quit without causing serious harm to your business or to your personal life. And the author is really careful to emphasize that harm is not equivalent to inconvenience. So the technology that you have that is convenient can still be optional. So at the end of the 30 days, the goal is that you would decide what technologies to reintroduce and how you would use them. And so some examples from some of his readers who've had success with this are one such man who was obsessed and anxious over constant doom scrolling. He chose to check a very short curated list of news sites once a day versus jumping on to his phone multiple times an hour to check what was going on in the news. And just this small shift for him helped his anxiety to drop like a rock. A lot of people reported a substantial uptick in the amount of books they finished reading. Again, it's about the opportunity cost of what are you not doing when you're digitally dependent. So a lot of people filled that time with reading books, which I think is fantastic. Some parents reported deeper, more meaningful interactions with their children where they felt more present. It's really easy to see how that could be the case because phones, especially, are a digital distraction to the people that are in the room with us. They can be that for many of us. So that's a huge benefit. And then finally, some decided they would only use digital content during specific periods of time. So, for example, rather than jumping on and listening to a podcast anytime you're bored, one guy decided he would use his work commute to listen to podcasts. So he's putting a boundary or constraint around his use of that technology. And so there were many, many, many other examples throughout the book, but I just share this to kind of get your wheels turning so you can think of ideas and ways that you could apply this to your own life. So, this 30-day overhaul that is discussed in this book does require a lot more thought and planning. And I haven't done it yet, but it's something that I do want to follow through on because I've already experienced the benefits of scaling back from deleting social media from my life and then scaling back substantially on my digital use. So I want to take that a step further and really quantify like what is my philosophy for using this technology. And the biggest thing for me is the opportunity cost of digital dependence. What am I not doing? What am I not doing that I value, that I highly value because I'm wasting time on a device? Now, I'm going to bring this back to wellness because that's what it all comes down to anyway. Part of being well is stewarding our energy and it's taking care of our mental health. There are many statistics that show that social media use increases the risk of anxiety, depression, and thoughts of self harm. But even if you don't experience those outcomes, the digital world is a draw on our energy, whether you're using social media or not. The digital world draws on our energy. It can fragment our focus, it can reduce our attention spans, and diminish our mental clarity. And these are not fruits of health and wellness. If we view our energy as a currency or as an asset that we can invest to get an ROI or a DOI, I say DOI as a deficit on investment, then the question becomes What is the best way to use my time for the highest return on the things that I value? This is not just a question of productivity. This is a question of aligning the time you spend to what's most valuable to you. And if wellness is a priority, then intentional use of digital content is a requirement. I am so excited to continue this conversation in the weeks, months, and years to come, really, because I think it's that important. So, my hope is that something in this episode really inspired you or encouraged you to take a deeper look at your relationship with technology. Maybe you've gleaned one thing that you want to apply to your life to help instill boundaries in your use of technology. Whatever it is, just make that first step in whatever way feels like it aligns for you. Thank you so much for listening to Wellness for High Performers. I hope you're leaving this episode feeling more clear on your next step and more grounded, more energized, and more capable of building the life that you want. For deeper conversations like this, join me at elevays.com. That's ELEVAYS.com, and get on the list for my weekly newsletter, The Elite Edge. It's where I share insights you won't find anywhere else. I'll see you in the next episode, but until then, take time for what matters.